Hello, Connection. We're talking from Ecclesiastes, chapter number 1, verse number 1 through 10, dealing with chasing the wind. Jesus mentioned the Spirit is like the wind to Nicodemus in chapter number 3 of John's Gospel. He said the Spirit is like the wind, and we don't know where its origin is, and we don't know where it's going. The only thing we can do is just feel the effects thereof. And we can pull from that it is virtually impossible to chase the wind. Chasing the wind, you don't know where it's coming from and you don't know where it's going. And the crazy thing about it is, with the naked eye, you can't see it. You can't see it. It's invisible to the naked eye. The only thing you can see is the effects. And Solomon is telling us, as a teacher that has had all the things of life, he's had the benefit of being raised in nobility. He had the benefit of even being dubbed the wisest man in his time. He had the benefit of having inherited, being the heir apparent of the throne of David. And David set up everything for him and gave him a unified nation of Israel. Had great camaraderie with all the nations around him. The best scenario. And yet he comes to summarize his life as one that is chasing the wind. I believe that some of us, if we're not careful, we will minimize the writing that is there, that is set before us, so that we can benefit from it. It's a terrible thing to have someone who has experience where we're trying to get to and think that when we get there, we will have a life that we've always wanted. And he's saying to us, no, you won't. That it's like chasing after a shadow. It's like going up the ladder and then recognizing when you get to the top, there's nobody there. Sacrificing and doing all the things that you do, buying into the social construct that this is what we're supposed to do. This is what life, the quality life, living your best life is supposed to look like. And we fall into the trap, if we're not careful, even as Christians, of chasing after the wind. And Solomon wants to get the record straight. The teacher wants to get the record straight and say to us that pursuing earthly pleasures is a destination to emptiness. Just talking about 4 points today. Pursuing earthly pleasures, pursuing things. Jesus said it like this, that the abundance of things does not equate to life. That you can have all the stuff and still not have life. He qualifies life as in him. Jesus said, life is in me. That the abundance of life is to have the abundance of him and to walk in his identity. So that begs the question, how much time do we spend in pursuing everything else except for what Jesus has commanded for us to do? Is our life congruent to a people that are chasing after a wind, even though we have, I'm talking to believers, majority of you are believers, even though we have life, even though we have the quality of life, even though we have restored relationship that we lost in Adam's and Eve's sin, that now we can walk in fellowship with him, and now we can walk inquiring of him, and now we can walk in true destiny. Are we replacing that quality of time that we could have with him with other things that are transitional, other things that are transitory? Are we placing a great emphasis on the things that Solomon already said, the pursuit of that, and when you arrive at that destiny, it's going to have a bad taste in your mouth. You're going to be empty. You're not going to be satisfied. The next point I want to look at is that the physical world is moving indifferently by the actions of we who are inhabited. The physical world is not changed. The same ability and gravity and the laws that govern the world in the beginning are basically the same laws that govern the world right now. The earth, the galaxy, the solar systems, the laws of gravity, laws of thermodynamics. All these laws that were in place when God made the heavens and earth relatively are unchanged. Yeah. And so all the toil that we're doing, all the labor that, just think, just reflect for a couple of seconds. Many of us are not the first generation in the United States. Many of us are second, third, generation in the United States. And let's, for a moment, just think about what did our forefathers do that changed the whole trajectory of the world? They worked hard. Many of them worked sun up to sundown. Many of them were, in some cases sharecroppers. Some of them were slaves. Some of them were indentured servants. Some of them came over here and they worked hard. They labored hard. Worked hard for the ethics. They had a good work ethic. Worked hard for what they did. And then you look up a couple of moments later and they were planted in that which they were working hard in. And did it actually make any difference? Did it make any difference in the long term? Did it change anything in the world? Did it move? And we have a lot of people who we herald. We have Gandhi, we have Cesar Chavez, we have Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, the list goes on and on and on. At the end of the day, did it change anything? Did it change the human condition? Is man still inhumane to man? Is man still doing evil to man? We have to say affirmatively, yes. It is still war. It is still plagues. It's still poor. Still people who are monopolizing of all riches, and while the peasants of the world are not occupying anything but working hard. And this is, when we read Ecclesiastes, we don't want to go into a place of depression. We don't want to go into a place, of saying, well, what's the use in being fatalistic about it? No. He's saying that don't put all your eggs in the basket that is not going anywhere. It's not saying that we shouldn't be a good steward, and we're not saying that we shouldn't be an industrial, because the Proverbs and the Wisdom book says that being a sluggard and being a sloth and being lazy is not a good connotation. It doesn't give it a good connotation. It's a very, it gives a connotation that is something that we should avoid. However, we should be aware that in our industrial lifestyle, in our busyness, that it's not going to produce any change in this world, any long-lasting change in this world that goes against the laws that have already been in place by God. Point number 3, stop looking for satisfaction within physical existence. Again, Solomon is saying to us that the rivers that go into the sea is constant. The sunrise, the sunset, and we know the sun doesn't rise, and we know that the sun doesn't set, and we know that we are the one who is going around on this earth that is a sphere, and we're rotating around the sun. We get that. But poetic language suggests that the sun rises and the sun sets. Is there anything different? Clouds go and come, and then they go right back. Is there anything different? When you look at life, it is not meant, God didn't construct life in the very beginning, in Genesis, for life to satisfy us, or the world to satisfy us as it relates to replacing Him. There was a benefit. There was a benefit of being the product of God, being made by God, because God blessed us with stuff. But it never was God's intent for man to idolize stuff and not worship Him. And so there is a problem. There is a problem. Mission control, there is a problem. Because what we have done, we have perverted what God's plan was. His plan was never for us not to worship Him. His plan was never for us not to commune with Him. His plan was never not to utilize the earth to glorify Him. His plan was always to do that. Last point. Jesus provides understanding and gives significance to life. Jesus is the key ingredient. I hate to use it as a formula or a recipe. Jesus is the essence of life. You can't have life without Him. You can have resistance. You can accumulate a whole lot of stuff like the ants do. You can you can eat a lot like the cows do in the fields. You can have dominion over in this or this one like the predators do in the wild. But at the end of the day, you know and I know that you're just chasing the wind. Real significance comes when doing life God's way. Finding ourselves hid in Him. Doing Him. Living for Him. Motivating what we do to please Him. Colossians says, and I'm getting long, Colossians says that everything that we do in word and deed, that we do it all worship unto Him. Are you chasing the wind? I hope you entertain that question through these points and through the scripture that you have been given in Ecclesiastes chapter number 1, verse number 1 through 10. Blessings.